afternoon. My name's Karl. I'm an alcoholic. Oh, what are we going to do? Oh, the first thing I'm going to do is, like in your area of town, first of all, I want to thank Dan for coming up, because if he wouldn't have come up, then I would have been the newcomer up here on the stage. And so I'm glad he announced his sobriety date. My sobriety date is January 21st, 1987. And yes. I want to thank Dick, for asking me to do this. I have to tell you right off the bat, when Dick called me and said, do you want to come to Cornhusker? I'm part of this group that's what I like to call sober vagabonds that sort of live out of a suitcase half our lives and are around Peg and Dick know exactly and what that means, and Jack does too. My friend Jack is here, and you know we never see each other in our own hometowns. We see each other out on the road, and one of the things, it's always a big honor to be asked to come to something like Cornhusker. And Dick called me a number of months ago and said, do you want to come to Cornhusker? And I said, oh, absolutely. I hear that's just absolutely a blast. And he said, but you don't get to tell your story. I go, oh? He goes, I want you to do this thing. And apparently I was somewhere that I don't even remember, and they had asked me at the last minute to fill in a gap on a workshop, and so I just winged it for an hour. And apparently Dick heard this, and he goes, I want you to do that instead. And I'm like, oh no. I don't even remember what I said. But anyway, now that's what you're going to get. And it's so good to see my friend Peg. It sounds like when she's cheering for people that she's warming up for football season, I believe. I also want to thank Johnny, who picked me up at the airport. We had a very interesting ride between the airport and here. You here, Johnny? No, that's right. He had to work or something. On our way over here, there's a guy standing on the corner. We pulled around. We're kind of close to downtown, and there was a guy standing on the corner with a gas can and looking like he was in big trouble. And Johnny pulled up and said, can we help you? And then Johnny looked at him closer and said, I know you, meaning he'd seen him at meetings before. And the fellow said, oh yeah, I'm out of gas, my car's down here, I really need some help here. And so Johnny said, hop in the car. And so we drive a ways to a gas station, we get out, and I decide, well, I'll just pop my credit card in and start filling up. He had this gas can, and I pop my credit card in, and the fellow goes, what are you doing? And I go, I was going to get you some gas. He goes, oh hell, I don't want gas, I want cash. It's like, so then, right. So then, in the meantime, Johnny is talking to him about he should come down to he'd seen him at some meetings, and he should come down to the Cornhusker, and it's a big deal. And he goes, oh no, I'm in some sort of shelter, halfway house type thing, and they're really strict, and they won't let us go to that. and I had to think about that one for a second, and I thought, oh yeah, they're so strict that they'll allow you to be out on the street corner with a gas can, but they won't let you go to the Cornhusker. And I want to thank Charles for waiting around at the golf course to make sure I got back here. That was very, very kind of him to do that. Anyway, most important, I have to identify as an alcoholic, because if you don't think that I ever drank, or if you're new, you got to know that I'm alcoholic. And I'm going to talk about why I'm an alcoholic first of all, before we get into what we're going to do when I figure that part out myself. But I'm an alcoholic simply because I have a really bizarre relationship with alcohol. That's why I'm an alcoholic. No other reason. It's because of this strange relationship that I have with alcohol. And there's three ways for me to describe this strange relationship that I have with alcohol. The first part of my bizarre relationship with alcohol happens when I drink it. Very strange thing happens when I drink booze. The book calls it an allergic reaction. The book says that the symptom of this allergic reaction that I get to alcohol is what they call the phenomenon of craving. And the best way that I can describe this thing called the phenomenon of craving in my life is that it seems like whenever I drink booze, the more I drink, the thirstier I get. It happens with nothing else, just booze. An example of that is they were kind enough to give me this glass of water, and over the next hour before the break that we take, I'll probably drink half of it. I don't know. If my mouth gets really dry, I might finish this whole glass of water. However, once I finish this glass of water, I can absolutely promise you that I'm not going to go get a case of water and lock myself in my hotel room. I'm not. I promise. And I can keep that promise. But if that was the only thing that made me alcoholic, well then, Just Say No would have wiped out alcoholism. In the early 80s, Nancy Reagan came out and said, just say no. I would have, and I imagine you would have gone, no, and just gone on and lived a happy, successful life just saying no. But I have this other bizarre part of my relationship with alcohol, and that is when I'm not drinking it. It seems like whenever I don't drink for a day or a week or a month, of and by myself, I have this mind that will rationalize and justify my walk back to the next drink at all costs. And it does not matter about the pain, humiliation, and suffering of a day, a week, or a month ago. And it does not matter at all whether it was my pain and humiliation or your pain and humiliation. It does not matter. Somehow, some way, I've got this mind that is able to paint a picture that makes it okay to take another drink. So I can't drink successfully because of this bizarre physical reaction that I get. But I cannot, of and by myself, not drink successfully because this thing the book calls the mental obsession. I'm damned if I do, I'm damned if I don't. It's the ultimate catch-22 called alcoholism. But this third part of my relationship with alcohol really explains a lot. And I could not put that into words until it was the year 2000, so I was already 13 years sober when I really was able to see it really plainly and be able to describe what I had sort of known, but I couldn't put my finger on it for years. It's the reason I'll chase that drink to the gates of insanity or death. And it's the reason why people like my mother would stand there in just absolute astonishment, when I'd be drunk again, and she'd maybe looking at me between the glass up there, and I'd be in some sort of custody as a teenager, and she'd look at me with this just astonished look like, I can't believe you did this again. What on earth are you thinking? And I'd be there going, I know it looks bad, Mom. I agree. It looks bad right now. But the other day, it seemed like a good idea to start drinking. It really did, I promise. The other day, I agree it looks bad now. But it seemed like a good idea the other day. And what was that? And it has a story to do with my mom and my brother. In the year 2000, my mom called me early in the year and said, really want you to go to Iceland with me. It's where you're from, and I want to go find the family farm and look up some relatives, and I really want you to come along. And I said, absolutely, I will go. And she said, and after that, we will head on over to, your brother's going to be in the south of France for the summer with his wife and kids, and they're going to be renting a big house, and we'll go down and visit them. And we went to Iceland, whole other story that had nothing to do with what I'm going to talk about, but that was actually a life-changing experience going to Iceland and meeting the AAers there. But then we went down to Avignon, France, and my brother was there with his wife and kids, and one of the nights that we were there in France with my brother and his wife and the kids, we all went out for a dinner at this big chateau in the countryside that was now a restaurant. It was like a castle, and they served a 13-course meal. I mean, a once-in-a-lifetime kind of experience, and with each one of these 13 courses, they would bring out a small little glass of wine, right, with each one of them. And the waiter or the maitre d' would explain, tell the history of the vineyard and the wine and the family behind the vineyard, and it was all very, very interesting. And so my brother and his wife and my mom were trying these little glasses of wine and listening very intently to the story told by the waiter and the maitre d'. And so they were trying all of those, and I was trying all of the Diet Cokes of the region. Didn't seem to have any story behind those. And if there's ever, alcoholic or non-alcoholic, if there's ever a perfect place to drink a lot, it's there right then. It was just we were sitting in this courtyard, and there was a string quartet playing, and beautiful colors of the countryside were right there, and it was the kind of the twilight of the evening. Just a beautiful, beautiful setting. And there with people that I love, really, really love. And indeed, my brother and his wife, they're not alcoholic, and neither's my mom. They were drinking more than normal. They were just having a ball, and if they liked one, they were having, I'll have another one of those, and and they were drink, as Jack likes to say, politely being overserved, right? And they were having a good time. And my mom, after 2 tiny little glasses of wine, and my mom has no obsession, no alcoholism, addiction, nothing, no issue of any type of that in her life. After 2 tiny little glasses of wine, when they bring the third one, she said to the waiter, "No more for me." And I looked and I said, Why not, Mom? I'm driving and she said what most non-alcoholics say. She said, when I said, "Why not?" she said, "Because I don't like the way it makes me feel." And I probably could have left well enough alone and just sort of shrugged my shoulders, but it really piqued my interest. And I said, "How does it make you feel?" And my mom is very articulate. She's a brilliant woman, actually, very articulate. And she said, "I'm sitting here in a once-in-a-lifetime experience with the people that I love the most. And I'm sitting here listening to this deep, rich music being played out in this amazing, look at the colors of the countryside. I want this absolutely ingrained in my mind forever. And if I drink just a little bit too much alcohol, everything starts to dull down. The music starts to sound shallow, the colors get blurry, and I have a hard time connecting in conversation." Did you guys hear that? That's the exact opposite relationship to alcohol than I have. Because what she's saying is, of and by herself, she hears the music of life. She sees the colors, and she connects with other human beings in conversation. And she adds a little alcohol, and everything dulls down and gets blurry. You see, me, of and by myself, I can't hear the music of life. I can't see the colors, and you're really goddamn boring. I add alcohol, and I can hear the music. Oh, I can hear the music. I will tell you where that cello is made, whether I know or not. And the colors come into focus, and they become alive. And you become very interesting. But not as interesting as me. And it's no wonder she would stand there baffled by the prices I will pay to drink. I remember just sort of having one of those experiences right there in my chair. I was going, oh my God, that's it. That's it. That's why I will sell my soul for a drink. Because I don't know how to live without it. And I have to find something else, or I can't stay sober. And so what I found is apparently what we're going to talk about today. And what it was that Dick pointed out to me was this little thing that I like to do about exactly what we read in just about every meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, the first few pages of chapter 5. And it must be important because in the 22 years that I've been here with you, I've had the privilege of being at meetings all over the United States, in fact, all over the world. And just about every single meeting that I go to, they read those few pages of chapter 5, except for this one. All they did was read the 12 steps. But right, you guys know that. Just about every single meeting you go to, they read chapter 5. Now, so it must be really, really important. But a lot of times, if you're like me, I don't always listen. Because I've heard it 1,000 times, if not 5,000 times. And when they start reading it, I'm kind of just getting settled into the meeting. And if you're like me, you're kind of looking around, seeing who's there. And, oh, great, my sponsor's here. Fantastic. God, I love that man. I feel so much better when he's sitting next to me and my mind starts going. And, oh, geez, what's she doing here? Hey, wait. Why is he here? Is he going over to talk to her? What's going on there? Boy, I haven't seen him in a long time. What's he doing? Boy, I don't have any cigarettes. Who am I going to bum a cigarette from, right? And you're just going, your mind is just going 1,000,000 miles a minute, and all of a sudden, they chant, God couldn't would have sought. Oh, meeting starting. And right? But I've come to really believe that, but then there's other times. And I bet you if you've been around for a while, or maybe not, whatever, maybe not so long, you've had that experience where somebody gets up to read it, and whatever it is about the tone of their voice or the way they read it, you just melt in your chair. You ever had that experience when they're reading chapter 5, and you may have heard it 1,000 times, and all of a sudden just maybe the timbre or tone of somebody's voice or the way they read it, and your heart just goes, I've had all of those experiences. But it must be really, really important. And I've come to believe that the reason that it's become so accepted in Alcoholics Anonymous that we read it all the time is because just in case nothing else of value at all gets said in the meeting, at least somebody that is new will at least hear this. Right? And I'm gonna quote about, a lot of times when people quote somebody, they just throw out a one-liner and they give some credit. But I'm going to quote a friend of mine who passed away in the last year and a half, and it's about 90 seconds worth, and it's Scott Redmond. I just loved that man with all my heart. Miss him a lot. I know there's a lot of other people that miss him too, but he used to say something so beautiful. And when somebody passes on, I've had 3 sponsors. The first sponsor was a guy in the Navy who was on my ship, and my second sponsor was a man named Eddie Cochran, who I had for 10 years until he died at 47 years of sobriety. My current sponsor is a man named Ray G. I've never changed sponsors unless absolutely necessary. Changed the first one because he had to stay in the Navy, and the ship was going to Asia, and I was 2 years sober, and I had to get another sponsor. And the second time was simply because Eddie passed away. And why did I bring that up when I was talking about Scott? You see, I think if I really get off track here, who you need to blame is Scott and Andy, the guys from Alaska. Last night, I was minding my own business. I got in late, and I was calling my kids. It was 10 o'clock here, calling my kids just to say goodnight, standing out just outside the registration area. And Andy and Brad come running by. Hey, want to go get something to eat? And I'm figuring that they're just going to go down the street to get a burger, right? We'll be back right away. No. We're gone for almost 3 hours at somebody's house way on the other side of town. And I've been traveling all day, and I had to get up at 5:30 to go golfing this morning. And I'm operating on 4 hours of sleep. So if I get distracted and my mind just absolutely shuts down, those 2 guys sitting in the front row, that's who we blame. Anyway, Scott used to talk about how important it is that if you're new or fairly new, that you really, really read the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. And the reason I'm bringing up what Scott says is because, as I made the joke about, in case nothing else of value gets said in the meeting, at least you're going to hear that portion of chapter 5. And if you're new, you don't want to be at the mercy of what anybody else says in a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, to think that might be really the solid word on alcoholism, that you really, really need to read the book. So you're not at the mercy of whatever gets said in a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. And if you're new or fairly new and you read the book or go through the book with somebody and you really hear what the book is saying and get it, you will have the extreme privilege of sitting in meetings, and as people are sharing, you'll be able to say to yourself quietly, oh, they're talking about Alcoholics Anonymous. Great. And once in a while, somebody will be talking in a meeting and you'll be thinking, they're not talking about Alcoholics Anonymous. And then every once in a while, like in my home group, every once in a while, somebody will be sharing and you'll be thinking, I don't even know what the hell they're talking about there. That's just one of my favorite ways that Scott used to trigger new people to read the book. Anyway, so let's take a look at that portion of chapter 5 and see what it's trying to say to us. So really, what is it trying to say to the new person? Because most new people are sitting here going, what is this? What am I sitting in? What do I need to do? I can't, if they're in the right frame of mind, they're thinking, I can't survive outside that door. Am I going to be able to make it? Do these people have an answer? They look kind of funny. Can I make this? And right there at the beginning of the meeting, if we're listening to chapter 5, it lets the new person know who does stay sober and who doesn't. Isn't that strange? How many people have ever, and I'm guilty of it too, you say nobody knows who's going to stay sober and nobody knows who's not. We're not God. Well, the book apparently knows who's going to stay sober and who's not. And they read it at every single meeting. So apparently we're supposed to know who's going to stay sober and who's not. But we always shy away at saying it, don't we? We always shy away from ever publicly saying that we might know who's going to stay sober and who's not. The book says it, first couple of sentences, right there in chapter 5. Rarely have we seen a person fail who has thoroughly followed our path. Those who do not recover are people who cannot or will not completely give themselves a simple program. Right there, they just told us who does stay sober and who doesn't stay sober. The people that do stay sober are the people who, rigorously follow this path. The word is thoroughly. Thoroughly followed our path. Right? That's who does stay sober. And what's the path? The path is working steps, going to meetings, having a sponsor, learning to work with others, having commitments. That's our path. Right? We got to have all those things active, or we're just kind of tiptoeing around the edges of the path. For us to really be on the solid path, we need to have all those things going on. We got to have a sponsor. We got to be working steps. We got to have commitments. We got to be going to meetings, and we have to be learning how to work with others. The ones that don't stay sober are the people who cannot or will not completely give themselves a simple program. So if I've been relapsing, I'm lucky I've been sober since my first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm truly convinced that the group that I came into right off the bat when I was fresh out of treatment was a solid group of Alcoholics Anonymous, and the people that were sharing at my very first meeting were sharing responsibly. I was one of those ones that I didn't sit here for a long, long time saying, I don't identify. It was within the first half hour of my very first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous that I believe those people in that meeting were sharing responsibly in that meeting, and I got it. I heard what Alcoholics Anonymous wants any new person to hear. They were making jokes about the way they drank, and they were making using these little sayings about, even more important, how they felt when they weren't drinking. And I just got nailed in my chair. And so if I had been relapsing, or if you've been relapsing, I have to ask myself this question, because it's just told me who's not staying sober. People who cannot or will not completely give themselves a simple program. So I got to ask myself, which one of those am I? Am I a cannot or am I a will not? 99 times out of 100, if we're honest with ourselves, we are will nots. Right? I don't want to work the steps. Why do I have to have a sponsor? Why do I have to have somebody tell me what to do? Commitment, I'm too busy with that life that I have out there drinking and using. I've got places to go and people to see. How can I make a commitment to show up and make coffee? Right? Work with somebody else, right? And the other thing that happens to a lot of it, I've seen it over the years with so many people that I know and love, is when they start on the track of chronically relapsing again and again and again. What happens, I'm convinced of this, and I like to use it in this sort of analogy. And I've seen it in the face of people that I know and love. Let's say the meeting's going on, and there's two people sitting right there in the meeting, and one of them has been coming and going for the last 15 years. Had 9 months, got loaded. Came back a few months later, put together 90 days, got loaded. Been doing this for 15 years. Right next to him is somebody who is absolutely brand new in their first week of sobriety. And they're both in their first week of sobriety. One's been coming and going, coming and going, coming and going. The other one, brand new, never been in AA, first time in AA, but they both got a week of sobriety. And our oldest old-timer, his name is Harvey A., 52 years of sobriety, in our meeting, says what he often says: if you don't take the first drink, you can't get drunk. The guy who is absolutely new in Alcoholics Anonymous in his first week, he just goes, huh? Did you hear that? Oh my God! If I don't take the first drink, I can't get drunk. He has a minor spiritual experience right there in his chair. You might find him later that day outside the AA club pacing back and forth smoking. If I don't take the first drink, I can't get drunk. Oh my God, if I don't take he might even tap somebody. Did you know that? If I don't take the first drink, and you know, they'll tap him, say, keep coming back, and he goes, whoa, right? It's a life-changing experience for him. He stays sober about 2 weeks just thinking about that. The other guy, who also has just 1 week of sobriety, but he's been coming and going and coming and going. And Harvey says, if you don't take the first drink, you can't get drunk. Flatline. No response. Nothing. In fact, maybe all he does is nudge the guy next to him and say, got a smoke? And walks out of the room, thinking, God, Harvey's talking again. It's a dangerous, dangerous, dangerous place to be, to have been coming and going and coming and going. And what I've seen, what I've seen out of people in my home group, I don't know whether it's true, it's just an idea, is that if we have been coming and going and coming and going, we got to work 5 times as hard for 1/5 of the result. And if you have been doing that, I would encourage you to try that. Usually men and women who are constitutionally incapable of being honest with themselves. I do not believe that they are saying to the brand new person, you need to get completely honest in all areas of your life or you are not going to make it. In fact, if that was true, none of us would be sitting here, would we? None of us would be sitting here. I know I wouldn't be. I believe they're only saying that I need to get completely honest with myself about my alcoholism, about what happens to me when I do drink and what happens to me when I don't drink. I need to get completely and thoroughly honest with myself about that. I'm convinced that's all they're asking me to do at this point. There are such unfortunates. They're not at fault. They seem to have been born that way. Well, at least they'll tell you that. I was born this way. They're not at fault. They seem to have been born that way. They're naturally incapable of grasping and developing a manner of living which demands rigorous honesty. I'm absolutely convinced again that the rigorous honesty that they are talking about is not the knee-jerk reaction that most of us, it happened to me last night. Actually, right when we were doing that can of gas, I decided I wanted to run into the store. I handed the guy a 20 for a soda and a pack of cigarettes, and he handed me back change for a $100 bill. And it was a knee-jerk reaction, because I know the price I'd have to pay if I didn't say something, because we'd be driving about 3 blocks away, and I'd have to tell Johnny, who I don't know that well, Johnny, can we turn around, right? And I don't want to go through that, right? Nor if I let it carry on farther in the middle of the night, then I'm going to have to get up and get a taxi cab and go back. The guy's off work. I'm going to have to write him a note now, right? Just don't want to pay those prices. So I had a knee-jerk reaction of, I think I gave you a 20, not 100. And he lifted up, you know how they put hundreds underneath the thing, and he lifted it up and goes, oh my God! And so we did it. That's not what I believe that the new person has to have right away. Because I guarantee you, if I was in my first couple of years of sobriety, if I got around to it, it'd be about 8 months later. Then I'm going to have to get an airplane ticket to Omaha. And the guy doesn't work there anymore. He got fired for having a bad till. I mean, the amend gets bigger and bigger and bigger, doesn't it? I believe they're talking about the rigorous honesty that we need when we are new is about what I had said before. What happens to me when I do drink, and what happens to be oven by myself when I don't drink. Their chances are less than average. There are those too who suffer from grave emotional and mental disorders, but many of them do recover if they have the capacity to be honest. I truly believe that they foresaw, and they probably had it too. Omaha's no different than the rest of the country. We have people, what's the clinical term? Dually diagnosed, severe mental disorders. And we got a lot of them in Alcoholics Anonymous. And they are telling us that no matter what your emotional problems are or severe mental problems you may have on top of your alcoholism, you can stay sober. You absolutely can. That's not going to block you. Then they go into this paragraph. Our stories disclose in a general way what we used to be like, what happened, and what we are like now. Have you ever felt, I don't know what to say when they call on me in meetings? Should I talk about? What should I talk about? Well, they had just read it 10 minutes before. They had just told us, and we've heard it 1,000 times, and we may not have really heard what it was they were trying to tell us. Our stories disclose in a general way what we used to be like, what happened, what we're like now. And I believe they want us to somehow figure out a way that we can do that in 3 minutes or an hour. That we somehow let the new person know when we share, most of the time, I don't believe all the times, but when we share, that we used to drink like them. We used to think like them, and we still might think like them every once in a while. And what we're trying to be like today. And we throw that out there. And this is what I try to tell the guys that I work with. Go ahead, get your little 3 to 8 minutes. Because in Covina, nobody raises their hand. The saying around, and it's different all over the country. In Covina and a lot of parts of Los Angeles, nobody raises their hand in the meeting. You got to get pointed. Got to get pointed at. In fact, it's really cruel what they say. In Covina, they say if you raise your hand, you have nothing to say. It's the people that don't raise their hand that have the most to say. Kind of strange, could be cruel. I agree with it every once in a while, though. But, so, some of the newer people are thinking, well, I never get called on, but if I do, what do I say? And some of them, other ones say, oh, they're never going to call on me anyway. So then all of a sudden, quite a few people that lead meetings love to just go right through the shoe section. You know the shoe section? It's the back couple of rows. It's where the loafers and the slippers are. They call it the shoe section. And they just start pointing right down, and they go, oh, they don't know what to say. So the guys that I work with, I say, and they complain, what am I going to say if they say? I say, you know what? Go on a bunch of panels. Get your little 3 minutes that you're ready to say so that you can feel good about something you say. Because most of the time, people with 60, 90 days, 6 months, they really have an urge to help the new person. If they're really catching on to AA, they really want to. And so I encourage them to go and get that little 3 minutes. Now, the difference is, if there's a tragedy in your life, right? You got to be able to not do your little 3 minutes or 5 minutes normal. You got to be honest. I just went through a divorce a couple of years ago. Believe me, my home group heard all about it. They did, sickeningly so, right? I wasn't going to sit in my home group when everybody knew, and it was public. Oh. If you ever have a hard time doing an inventory, have a public divorce in AA. Your inventory will be shared. Absolutely, all over the place. And the other problem with that, although I'm really, it's worked out really, really well now. She and I are the best of friends right now, and we've made a real commitment. We have 2 beautiful kids, absolute beautiful kids. I'm the kind of guy, if you get anywhere near me and talk to me for 10 seconds, I will be showing you pictures, whether you want them or not. And in this day of high tech, I might show you videos. It's really annoying, really annoying. But see, now I went off track again. These two guys right here. If you have decided you want what we have and are willing to go to any length to get it, then you are ready to take certain steps. There's a couple really key words in there. If you have decided you want what we have and are willing to go to any length to get it, then you are ready to take certain steps. Notice that it does not say, if your wife has decided you want what we have and are willing to go to any length. It does not say, if your probation officer has decided you want what we have. Because quite often, isn't this the million-dollar question? When am I supposed to work the steps? Am I supposed to work the steps now? Should I wait a few months? Should I wait till I feel better? Oh, I love that one. Should I wait till I feel better before I work the steps? No, because that will be on a bar stool is where you will be feeling better. That's where you'll be feeling better. But they read it in every single meeting. Why can't we answer that question when somebody says, when should I work the steps? Well, it tells us. We hear it in every single meeting. If you decided you want what we have and are willing to go to any length to get it, then you are ready to take certain steps. It doesn't matter whether it's 30 minutes after you get here or 30 years after you get here. When you are willing to go to any lengths to get what we have. Right? And there's another thing that we need to notice. It also has said, it does not say, if your sponsor has decided you want what we have and are willing to go any lengths to get it. It's when we have decided we want what AA has and are willing to go to any lengths to get it. Then we're ready to take certain steps. At some of these we balked. We thought we could find an easier, softer way, but we could not. With all the earnestness at our command, we beg of you to be fearless from the very start. Fearless and thorough from the very start. Look at that word. With all the earnestness at our command, we beg of you. They're pleading with us. The first 100 that decided to put it this way were they're begging us from their graves. Why? Because you've seen the heartache. If you're on the front lines and you're sponsoring, you're working, you're going on panels, you see the devastation all the time. And so the first 100, they're begging us from their grave. Please, please, if you really want this, go for it all. Go for it all. Don't sort of piecemeal it. Throw yourself with absolute abandon into this. Some of us have tried to hold on to our old ideas, and the result was nil until we let go absolutely. Nil, nothing. You know, you've heard this 1,000 times. The half measures does not get us half sobriety. It does not. The result is zip until we let go absolutely. Remember that we deal with alcohol. Cunning, baffling, powerful. My late sponsor, Eddie, his widow always brings this up in meetings. It's one of her little things that she always loves to say. And it falls right in the category of what I was just talking about always having your few little things that you love to say when you're called on. And she always loves to throw it out to the new people. Remember that we deal with alcohol. Cunning, baffling, powerful. Which one of those words is the most important? And of course, some new people, baffling. No, powerful. No, cunning. And she goes, no, remember. Right? Without help, it is too much for us, but there is one who has all power. That one is God. May you find him now. When I was new, I didn't hear that. I thought that Alcoholics Anonymous, because of this power greater than yourself, your own understanding, I thought it was like pagan Rome, because everybody was talking about they had their God, this God, and my God, and that God, and the parking lot God, and the relationship God. I always loved that one. You know, I remember when I was brand new, I was at this meeting, and I was kind of sitting over way off the side of a big speaker meeting in San Diego, and there was this girl about 3 seats away from me. I was about 90 days sober, and she was beautiful, amazing, and we talked for about 10 seconds at the break, and I knew that God had put her in my life because she was an alcoholic and an addict. She had done drugs like me. So God must have... Amazing that she, we had so much in common. So I'm out there talking with my first sponsor and a couple of his friends, and I go up to my first sponsor, Bob W., and I go, Bob, I met this girl. God put her in my life. God put her in my life. And Bob was standing there, not quite knowing what to say, but one of his friends jumped right into the conversation without being asked and said, hey, Karl, God's not a pimp. It's like... felt like, I don't remember asking you to join this conversation. I later found out that that guy was listening to a Chuck C tape earlier in the day. And had just been waiting to hear it, and hear somebody say that. But I was very confused on this God thing. Now, I'm a Lutheran minister's son. That didn't go over very well when I was a neighborhood drunk and a neighborhood drug dealer as a teenager. It just didn't match up very well. But when I was new, my parents were really mad in the last 5 years of my sobriety, and for the first year of my sobriety at least. At least in the first year they had a slight hope, but the thing that they were most excited about in my first year of sobriety, I was in San Diego, they were in Seattle. They were most excited about that 1,000 miles between us. That's what they were most excited about, but they were willing to talk to me on the phone. And I remember I'd been in a meeting where that was an extra powerful sort of tone of the meeting was, my God will help me. If you want to borrow my God, it sounded like everybody was talking about 1,000 different gods. And so I got all confused and I called up my dad and I said, Dad, I know we're not, we're struggling on conversations here, but, you've been a minister and a theologian for 40 years. You've spent your whole life talking about God, living for God. Please tell me, what's God? And I thought he would come and give me some sort of beautiful answer, and I'd come back to that meeting and stand up with my 90 days and straighten everybody out. And he said, you want to know what God is, huh? And I said, yeah. Can you please tell me what God is? And he said, how long has it been since you've had a drink? And I said, well, I think I'm about 98 days or something like that. And he said, well, then God is whatever got you to those people in AA. For Christ's sake, do what they say. Click. "22 years sober, still believe it. God is whatever got me to you people. That's what God is to me. Half measures availed us nothing. We stood at the turning point. We asked his protection and care with complete abandon." Guys, ever, in looking back over your lives, I remember one time when somebody was reading this, we stood at the turning point. I've been able to look back at my 22 years, and there's about 5 major turning points in my life in sobriety. There's a million small little ones. But I remember the very first turning point. It was my first turning point in Alcoholics Anonymous was the very day I got out of a treatment center. And I'm sitting in the back of a meeting. The only reason I went to this particular meeting was because I didn't know where else to go. And this particular meeting, while I was in this Navy treatment, I got sober in the military. I got sober in the Navy. The thing that I noticed, when they took us out to meetings almost every single night. So as far as I'm concerned, it was a fine treatment center, because any treatment center that takes you out to meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous every night is doing a really good job, no matter what else they do during the day. And I had sort of been scoping which meetings I might go to when I got out. And now one would think that I might be scoping out where were there a lot of old timers, where were people funny, where were there good-looking girls, or any of the above things that some young guy at 25 years old getting sober might think about as to which meetings he might go to when he got out of treatment. I had chosen this place simply because I was having to push start my car. This meeting hall, the street was on a little bit of an incline. These are tools for living that you need to have when you're out there. So that's why I remembered where this particular meeting hall was. And the big major turning point in my life was sitting right there in the back of that meeting hall that night, first meeting out of that treatment center. And well, I'm not even going to go into that story, but in a million ways, that night at that meeting, And one guy who was operating on his primary purpose that night, it literally, when I look back at it, which way was my life going to go? And it literally was riding on another guy and his commitment to Alcoholics Anonymous that night. And I always like to encourage people, you know, I never know if I'm going to be that guy that night when I'm sitting there thinking, I'm too tired. No, I don't want to go to the meeting that night. No, I don't want to get on a plane this time. I know I said I'd be there, but I don't know if I'm going to be that guy in another guy's life, and I don't know whether you're going to be that guy or gal in that other person's life. Because literally, I don't know what would have happened in my life had that one particular guy that night not been there. We ask his protection and care with complete abandon. Here are the steps we took which are suggested as a program of recovery. Now, I'm not going to go over the 12 steps simply because they are telling me that I have to do 3 hours. So I'm going to scoot through them right now, and after the break, we're going to come back to this. I just decided that now. Remember, I told you, I'm winging this thing, you guys. I really am just winging this thing. But I'm going to go back and probably go through steps 1, 2, 3, and 4 when we come back after the break. But we still have about 15 minutes to figure out the rest of it. But I am going to read them. We admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. 2, came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. 3, made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood him. 4, made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. 5, admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrong. 6, were entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. 7, humbly asked him to remove our shortcomings. 8, made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. 9, made direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. 10, continued to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. 11, sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood him, praying only for knowledge of his will for us and the power to carry that out. 12, having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to alcoholics and to practice these principles in all our affairs. I am going to sort of stick on 12 here just for a little bit before we move on, because it's so important to me in the wording of step 12. Having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to alcoholics. That word tried is so ever important. It's really important that we notice that nowhere in our literature does it say you need to make sure you are qualified before you go work with anybody. We need you to get a card signed off that says you have been through 9 different step study workshops, and we want signatures from your sponsor, your sponsor's sponsor, and just in case, his sponsor, before you ever try to meddle in somebody else's life and possibly destroy a newcomer's life by working with them. Right, as if we're going to destroy a newcomer's life. I know, they've got a lot going on that we could really mess up. Very dangerous. It's so important that we just go out and wing it. I'm so glad that Bill and Bob didn't think they had to be qualified before going to work with anybody. And and if you're new or fairly new and you haven't even worked the steps, you can really work with somebody. You know how you can, if you got a car, you are so valuable in Alcoholics Anonymous. Man, just throw them in your car and take them to where the message, if you feel you are not qualified to carry the message, throw the new person in your car, go to where the message is being carried, and you can both get it. And when I was like 2 years sober, that was a really important piece of direction. Throw new people in your car. I was 2 years sober. I was still in that same car that I push-started, simply because my first sponsor and his sponsor were real sticklers about that amends. They were not amends step. They were not going to let me go get a new car before I got even with society on what I already owed, and I was in deep debt. And they absolutely were not going to until I started making serious payments back. I mean, one of the things that I owed a lot of money in a lot of places, and my parents were angry about the money that I owed. And you know what? They were angry over just the money they knew about. And there was a lot more that they didn't know about that I had to inform of them later. But there was this other thing. This was a huge, other than the money I had flat out stolen from them, stolen my dad's credit cards at some point in my life and racked up huge bills and then go, oh, somebody must have stolen it. Unbelievable. right? All sorts of stuff like that, and them sending me money. But this other thing, my parents had paid for a bachelor's degree back when I was between like 18 and 21, and I spent 3 years at a university on their money and got like 11 credits, I think. At any given time, my grade point average matched my blood alcohol content, for God's sake, right? And so when I got out of the Navy, when I was 2 years sober, that's one of the things that I had to do, is go back and either pay them back for that bachelor's degree, because I didn't have one, or go get what they had paid for in the first place. Right? That was my straight ahead direction, and that's why I wound up in the town I've been in for the last 20 years in Covina, is because that's just where the university that I was going to go to was. And I was still push starting the same car, little 68 Volkswagen, hole in the floorboard, and one of the best pieces of information came from the man that became my sponsor right when I got to Covina. His name was Eddie Cochran. As I told you earlier, is died with 47 years of sobriety, a beautiful man, one of the pioneers of Southern California Alcoholics Anonymous. Joe knows him. Beautiful man, beautiful man. He was like one of the very first alcoholic and addicts that ever came to AA. Came in 1951. He always used to make jokes of, came into these AA meetings and I'd be talking about drinking and dropping reds, and everybody in the meeting thought I was killing communists. Then I'd tell them about drinking and taking uppers, and they thought I was talking about teeth. And then he said, and you can imagine what they thought about when I told them I was smoking shit. It's like, whoa! I can just imagine those meetings in 1951 with Eddie doing that. It was just hilarious. But one of the very first things that Eddie told me I needed to do was put new guys in my car. And I started to object, saying, Eddie, I got to push start the thing. There's a hole in the floorboard. He said, you do that and your life will get better. I did not see how my life would get better by putting new guys in my car. In fact, I thought I might get sued. I didn't have any money, so I don't know why I'd be worried about that. But what if one of them fell through the floorboard or something? And then I realized that Eddie was, 10 years sober when I was born, so I thought I'd give it a shot. And the very first night that I put new guys in my car, I realized this man had not lied to me. The very first night, my life got better. After the meeting, I looked over my shoulder, and by God, my life got better. The new guys were push starting my car for me. He didn't say how much better, he just said better. So really, man, just if you have to, just wing it on working with others. As long as you're not getting involved in their day-to-day lives and telling them who they should stay married to or what job they should have or not have or trying to give advice like that, get out there and wing it. And it's so important because there's nobody else that can help us but us. Nobody else can help us but us. It's so important of one alcoholic working with another. There's just nothing like it. I think I'll tell that story later when we get into it. But many have exclaimed, what an order, I can't go through with it. Do not be discouraged. No one among us has been able to maintain anything like perfect adherence to these principles. Ooh, that's a big one. No one among us has been able to maintain anything like perfect adherence to these principles. How many people have sat and sort of judged other people in AA through their sobriety? I'm raising my hand. Yes. Judge new people. Judge old-timers. Oh, yeah, absolutely. Not walking like they talk. Oh, I can't believe that old-timer actually did that. Oh. But if we've been here a while, they've told us 1,000 times, no one among us has been able to maintain anything like perfect adherence to these principles. No one means not me, not you, and get this one, not Dick. Not even Peg. Jack is a long way from it. Andy is even further away. And Brad sponsors Andy and lets it go on. no one among us has been able to maintain anything like. That means not even freaking close. Anything like perfect adherence to these principles. So quit judging each other, and for God's sakes, please quit judging me. Please, please, please. That has special meaning in my home group when I say that. Please quit judging me. We are not saints. The point is that we're willing to grow along spiritual lines. The principles we have set down are guides to progress. We claim spiritual progress rather than spiritual perfection. I'm glad they say that. Now, I may change my mind later, but it's really important. I may change my beliefs. Have you guys changed your beliefs from when you were 5 years sober to where you're at now, or even when you were 20 years sober, if you're 40 years sober? What's really bad about being taped is because you change what you believe over the years. And somebody can come up to you that listened to something from 10 years ago and have an issue with something you said 10 years ago. And you want to say, well, I don't even believe that anymore either. I agree, right? But my divorce is on about 30 CDs. It's bad. It's really embarrassing. Especially the ones like in the first 4 months of when it was happening. And it's like, I couldn't call up and say, I'm sorry, I'm going through a divorce, I can't show up. For some reason, AA doesn't think that's okay. They sort of like, what? So it's like I still had to show up. And I did that here in Omaha. Bad. Peg was there. She started to cry too. It was that bad. And it was just horrible. But I'm really, really glad that because what I believe now, and the reason I brought that up, what I believe now, I may change my mind. But right now, I don't think there is the availability of spiritual perfection available to me right now in my state as a human being right now. I don't believe spiritual perfection is available. I believe constant and consistent spiritual progress is available. And I think it's sort of like a really good, solid blue chip stock. It kind of goes like this. But if you draw a straight line over a 22-year period, it's gone up. But man, there's serious dips in my life, serious dips in my sobriety, in my spiritual progress. Our description of the alcoholic, the chapter to the agnostic, and our personal adventures before and after make clear 3 pertinent ideas. I believe what they're saying right now is you have read our description of the alcoholic. I believe they're talking about everything up to the chapter to the agnostic, everything up to chapter 4. They are assuming this if we are at this point. And you've read the chapter to the agnostic and our personal adventures before and after. And they're assuming, I believe when they wrote this, that maybe, hopefully, we have read some of the stories in the back. Now, these days, I believe what they're saying is, we hope you've been to a bunch of speaker meetings, a bunch of participation meetings, and hopefully read some stories in the back. And we hope these 3 ideas of our description of the alcoholic, the chapter to the agnostic, and your experience in listening or reading about our personal adventures before and after make clear 3 pertinent ideas. A, that we were alcoholic and could not manage our own lives. B, that probably no human power could have relieved our alcoholism. And C, that God could and would if he were sought. I love the very next sentence, and that's what we're going to talk about later. Being convinced. We were at step 3. Being convinced at what? Those 3 ideas, A, B, and C. They tell us that we need to be convinced on those 3 ideas. And I'm going to tell this little story about how important it is, and then we're going to take a break because we've got about 11 minutes on this particular CD. I bring that up because the taper always comes up and goes, never go over this amount of time, or try to fill up this amount of time. And it's important to, do you know how important people that do the job like Dick and Peg do and Dicob tapes? It is so important, so very, very important, because I don't know about you, but in Los Angeles, in Southern California, I spend hours and hours and hours on the freeway for various reasons. It's not all noble. A lot of it is trying to get to a golf course I've never played before, right? A lot of it's work, a lot of it's AA miles. But if I have one of those CDs, you see, if I don't have a recovery CD to listen to, it's 50-50 whether I arrive there a better person or a worse person than when I left. It depends. But if I'm listening to a tape of Jack or a tape of Peg or a tape of Bob and Linda, I love Bob. If I've listened to a CD, I arrive a better person than when I left. And also people that are in remote areas around the world. So the reason I brought that up, I try to do what they're asking me to do, because you never know where these things wind up at. But it's really, really important that we remember that concept of one alcoholic sharing with another, that no one else can help us but us. No one else can help us but us. So we have to, if we have found the solution and we are reasonably armed with facts about ourselves, we have to take our seat in meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous, because nobody can help us but us. And how I learned that, I will never forget. The value of one alcoholic sharing with another alcoholic. I was in my first year of sobriety. My first sponsor was a guy named Bob W. He was on my ship, and whenever our ship would pull into a foreign port in my first couple of years of sobriety, my first sponsor, Bob, and I would often split a hotel room, and then we'd find the AA meeting in town, and we'd go to the meeting, and we would split the hotel room simply because we'd want to not sleep on the ship. If you're in the Navy, you got a chance not to sleep on that ship with 60 other men in one room, stacked 3 high, you take it. And so at this particular time, we're in Victoria, British Columbia, and we went out and got a hotel room, and then we went to the AA club. And after the meeting, Bob said, I'm not feeling that well. I'm really, really tired, Karl. I'm heading back to the hotel room. And I stayed out at the AA meeting. I don't know, hung out with the people, went to coffee, went to another meeting. I don't know, flirted with a girl. Probably all of the above is probably what I did. I don't remember. But when I got back to the hotel room a few hours later, there was Bob. And Bob had found this guy from our ship named Blair on the street. Blair was absolutely wasted, just out of his mind, didn't even know where he was at. And Bob had Blair propped up against the headboard on my bed with pillows and an end table and a chair, like this. And Blair's propped up like this. And Bob was sitting on the other bed reading the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous to him. Now, this just was foolish. Blair didn't even know where he was at. If Bob was this, desperate to stay sober tonight, why didn't he just stay with us? We had a good time. So I don't know. I threw in my 2 cents worth, and Blair I think he vomited all over my bed. And, then Bob took him back to the ship or into another hotel room. I forget what happened later that night. And that's the last I heard of Blair for a couple of weeks. We're back in port down in San Diego, and it's the middle of the night. And I'm in my rack sleeping. It's about 3 a.m. and all of a sudden on the side of my rack, Karl, wake up. What? And it's Bob. And Bob says, come on, Blair's on the Coronado Bridge. We're going to get him. I'm like, what? Apparently over the last couple of weeks, Blair had been trying to drink, trying not to drink, trying to drink, trying not to drink. He's at the jumping off point. He's up at the Coronado Bridge. And I don't know if you know about the Coronado Bridge down in San Diego, but it's a really popular suicide spot. It's such a popular suicide spot that actually they have suicide hotline phones up at the top, just in case you change your mind. And Blair had gotten onto this suicide hotline phone, and this is apparently what he was saying to the very well-qualified, well-meaning suicide counselor on the other end. Blair was saying to him, I will only talk to Bob W. Now, this highly educated, well-meaning counselor on the other end was saying, who's Bob W? And Blair was saying, it's anonymous. So the counselor went and got her supervisor. That supervisor got on. They started hammering questions at him in the way that trained suicide people do. Found out what ship, that he was in the Navy, what ship he's from. So they called down to the quarterdeck of our ship at 3 a.m. And Suicide hotline phone, the guy answers the phone at 3 a.m. up on the quarterdeck of the ship, and the suicide hotline phone person goes, I know this is like finding a needle in a haystack, but is there a Bob W. on that ship? Now, my first sponsor, Bob, he would guard your anonymity at the level of that ship, but he did not guard his own, so he could be of service at any time. So that guy who answered the phone that night said, yeah, we know Bob. Mr. 12 Steps, we know all about him. So they go and get Bob. Bob comes down and gets me. Wake up, Karl, wake up. Oh, okay. So he goes, come on, get in the car. We're going down to the Coronado Bridge. So we're driving down there in the middle of the night, and Bob says, hey, Karl, grab the big book in the glove box. Bone up on working with others. It's like, all right. So. And then he says, forget it. We're going to wing it. And we get down to the base of the Coronado Bridge, and everything that San Diego County has available for a situation like this is there. The police department is there, the fire department is there, the paramedics are there, the on-duty psychologist is there at the base of the bridge, and they got this whole camp set up. And Bob and I walk up on this scene, and the fireman who seems to be in charge looks over and goes, is one of you Bob W.? And Bob goes, yeah, that's me. And the fireman goes, I don't know what you're going to do. We've been talking for an hour, but here, go ahead. Hands him this little speakerphone contraption. Bob says, Blair? And you can hear on the other end, Bob, is that you? And Bob says, yes, Blair, now get the hell down from the bridge. And you can hear, okay. One alcoholic can affect another alcoholic like no one else can. Don't forget that. Keep your seat in Alcoholics Anonymous. All right, we're going to take a break.